Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Armando Colombo, President and CEO of the Menninger Clinic, and I want to welcome you all to our Build a Bridge to Living virtual event. In support of Suicide Prevention Month, the Menninger Clinic is hosting this important event to continue to raise awareness of suicide and lead the conversation for prevention. I want to share with you some statistics. In the US alone, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death. On average, 132 Americans die each day by suicide. 90% of those had a diagnosable, treatable mental health condition. In total, 48,433 Americans die by suicide each year, and these rates are 1.5 times higher for veterans. And finally, 10.3% of Americans have thought about suicide, and 54% of us have been affected in some way. We are hopeful that events like this will bring awareness, conversations, and solutions. I want to give special thanks to Origin Bank for being our presenting sponsor for this event. We're fortunate to have them in our community. We're extremely excited to have such a great attendance. Many of you I've met, but to those I haven't had a chance to meet, a very special welcome from the Menninger Clinic. Believe it or not, today marks my 1-year anniversary of joining the Menninger Clinic, and I would like to give special thanks to our board directors for their unwavering support of the clinic and me, especially Jeffrey Payne, Ronnie Cunod, Vivi O'Sullivan, Linda Jones, and Rob Wilson, and I remain honored and humbled to lead this organization. Our first year has been really busy. We developed a 5-year strategic plan focused on expanding clinical services, research, and education. We've successfully navigated the pandemic and continue to, keeping our patients and staff safe from COVID-19. Menninger quickly transitioned our information technology capabilities to add virtual services for our outpatient programs and treatment of others in the community. We developed outreach relationships in the community, beginning with the Baylor College of Medicine, our affiliate, and expanded to organizations working in the mental health space, as well as law enforcement and medical response. We utilized the downturn in patient intakes to expand services, opening the door to new patient populations for the virtual Menninger Mom service, our adolescent Menninger 360, which is a PAC program in our community, and our sleep medicine service, the first of its kind. I'm certainly extremely excited about the future of the Menninger Clinic. We will be breaking ground in November on a state-of-the-art 33,000 square foot outpatient services center that will allow greater access and expansion of our services to meet the needs of those in our community. I also want to offer special thanks to Stacy and Michael Ellington, our annual luncheon chairs, who have stuck with us through COVID. As you know, our annual luncheon was postponed, but we've rescheduled it for May of 21, and our keynote speaker will be Patrick Kennedy. Please look for more information at menningerclinic.org. It's going to be a wonderful event, and I appreciate Stacy and Michael sticking with us. A few housekeeping items before I turn it over to Sergeant Briggs. Sergeant Briggs will present for about 45 to 50 minutes. And then we will stay on for Q&A after the presentation starting about 1 o'clock. And you can submit questions via the Q&A button. And now I'd like to introduce Kevin Briggs. Sergeant Kevin Briggs spent 23 years as a California Highway Patrol officer stationed near the Golden Gate Bridge. His serve and protect mission saved hundreds of individuals on the brink of suicide, earning him the title Guardian of the Golden Gate Bridge. Since retiring, Sergeant Briggs has dedicated himself to promoting mental health awareness through his organization, Pivotal Points. And I can't tell you how thrilled we are that he's with us today. So Kevin.
Armando, thank you very much. Congratulations on your 1-year anniversary. Hope you have many, many more.
Thank you.
Let me pull up my presentation here. Give me 1 second. Almost there. Okay, so I want to start right in with this. Once again, my name is Kevin Briggs. I was with the California Highway Patrol for 23 years. Worked on the Golden Gate Bridge most of that time. I'm from Marin. Marin connects to San Francisco via the Golden Gate Bridge. So I had crossed it many times prior to coming on with the Highway Patrol in 1990, but I had no idea about the number of suicides on that bridge and the number of folks who came to suicide and were talked out of it by the folks that worked there. So when I began working on the bridge, I had no training. I didn't know what to do, how to approach someone, what to say, what not to say. I think it was to be honest with you, it was a disservice to those folks. It was a disservice to me. But we overcome and adapt, right? I wanted to do this job. Once I saw the look in people's faces, you could see a young woman over the rail here. This is a 4-foot barrier. This is the east sidewalk of the Golden Gate Bridge. It would be facing towards the bay. To look in someone's eyes and to see they want to live, but they just can't figure out how. Their coping mechanisms, their coping skills are gone. Based on the stressors that they have, they're having just a very, very difficult time. And they come here to end their life. So after this, you can't see it because of the fog, but where that young woman is, this is a teenager, is 220 feet down to the bottom. Survivability rate is 1-2%. Very, very few people live through this. This photo I took shortly before I retired in 2013. And like I said, this is a teenager. In my opinion, it's very unique because most of the time, teenagers are so impulsive, they only see 5, 6, 7 years into the future, that when they come up there, they go right over the rail and they're gone. You know, a tragedy all the way around. So we were very, very lucky to get a chance to speak with this young woman. And what this officer is doing, if you can see his legs sticking out, is trying to talk to her, finding out what's going on. What I learned and what I teach now in negotiator schools is when I walk up to folks, instead of just walking all the way up, is I'm going to give you a rundown of kind of what I do, is I just raise a hand. Hi, I'm Kevin. Is it okay if I come up and talk with you for a while? I want to take the law enforcement part out of this, even though I'm dressed up in the uniform. I want to get their permission to come up and speak with them. And when they allow me to, I want to get at eye level if at all possible. We always have this officer safety thing going on. But you see how this officer's down low now talking with her? I think that's a great way of doing this, trying to find out what's going on. And we're going to take however long is needed for these folks. So he spoke to this young woman for about 20 minutes. And then she did come back over and we take them to one of the local hospitals for assistance. 3 things that I saw 99% of the time while working up on her is most folks suffered from a mental illness, whether diagnosed or not. They, in their eyes, they were a burden to their families. And if they were taking a medication for a mental illness, they stopped it a month or so before. 3 big indicators of somebody that is suicidal or can be suicidal. A lot of this stems from loss. Many things go on in our lives, but common causes of a crisis, a lot of these stem, like I said, from loss, all these different things occurring. Even when we look at freedom, when someone is sentenced to prison, the first couple of months, there's high rates of suicide, unable to adapt to that new way of life. So something to be aware of. Armando spoke about this a bit, but I want to reiterate this. Look at the number of deaths in 2018. Over 16,000 homicides in this country. I was a traffic officer. About 40,000 traffic accident fatalities. Now look at this. Over 48,000 people lost their life to suicide. This should wake people up. We're losing a lot of folks. I do want to tell you this too. Homicides are on their way down. Traffic accident fatalities on their way down. Suicides continue to rise. So we have a lot of work to do. Starts with each and every one of us. It starts with how are we doing, and then expands to our families and friends and otherwise. What are some of the contributing factors to a mental illness? Environmental, things that a lot of times we can't control. A divorce, a loss of income, a death in the family, things like this, being diagnosed with a terminal cancer. For youth, maybe changing schools or going from high school to college, pressures for good grades by the parents, bullying, molestation, these things like this. Substance abuse, long-term, has been linked to paranoia and depression. Traumatic brain injury, we see this with a lot of folks who played professional sports. And this definitely includes concussions. Genetics can play a role. I did lose my grandfather to suicide. He lost his life before I was even born. I never got a chance to meet him and see what he was like. And shame. Shame is a huge driving factor in suicide and substance abuse. Take a look at this photo, please, and we're going to come back to this later on. But you see a gentleman over the rail on the Golden Gate Bridge, and around the two towers is just this pipe that you see where he's standing on this very small pipe. So everybody focuses on that individual, the obvious crisis. But what about the individual that's speaking with him? And if you recognize that that happens to me in this time, there are other people doing this work. But when I first started with the patrol working down at the bridge, we had only one officer working down there for a very large area. After the tragedy in 9/11, we put more officers down there, and the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District hired like security guards too. So we have a lot of people down there now. But think about you being over there talking to this individual. How are you doing? And we're going to talk about what to say and what not to say in a while. But I want to tell you a little bit about me and how I come to be here in front of you. So right out of high school, a long time ago, 1981, I went into the military, into the United States Army, Airborne Infantry, and I went over to Germany. And in 1983, while I was there, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was only 20 years old, testicular cancer. Tell you how that hits you pretty hard. A young guy, only 20 years old. I had my first operation in Germany. Then they sent me back to San Francisco, where I had two more operations, one being a lymphadenectomy, to where you can see they cut me from sternum all the way down by my belly button, and they take out lymph nodes. They took out over 40, and over 30 were cancerous. So that cancer had spread in my abdomen. So I underwent chemotherapy for several months. And of course, what happens with chemotherapy, for me anyway, it varies on individual, but I lost all my hair. I became depressed, lost a lot of weight, went down about 135 pounds. My hands were shaking. They were giving me lithium to I believe, raise the white blood cell count. But with that, my hands would shake a lot. So you're not hungry, at least in my case. But when I did want to eat, now my hands are shaking like this and I'm dropping plates and things. It's just a horrible thing to go through, but you have to do it. So went off through this, and my tumor markers would go down every single time. So it was working, and it was working fantastic. I get through this, start gaining weight, getting some strength back, worked with my father for a while in San Francisco. He had a printing business, but it wasn't for me. I was not a printer. I went into corrections, got accepted into state corrections. And if you've heard of San Quentin State Prison, I worked there for a while before going on to the Highway Patrol. But in 1989, when I was working at San Quentin, my mother developed cancer from smoking, lung cancer. She was undergoing chemotherapy. It did not go well. She quit it. She was bedridden eventually for quite a long time. And then she died at our family home. We all gathered around her, and we see her last breath, and then I close her eyes. Very traumatic experience. And I want you to think about contributing factors to a mental illness as we're going along here. So she was just 49 years old when she passed. I used to think, well, she lived a pretty full life. But now that I'm 57 and well past that, she had a long ways to go. 49 is way too young to be passing away. We continue on in my life's episode, and I ride a motorcycle for the Highway Patrol. One of the collisions I was involved in was I was out on a country road, one lane each direction, 45-mile-an-hour zone. I had some cars ahead of me, some behind me. We're all just tooling along, when another motorcyclist comes the opposite direction towards us, going very, very high rate of speed, crosses over, double yellow lines around a curve, just misses the car ahead of me and hits me head on. I barely remember anything about this, but some folks had picked me up and put me in a car. It was quite a while before first responders got there. And of course, I'm talking about the traumatic brain injury and concussion. But when the paramedics got there, they put me on a flat Jeep and took me out into a field, and we're waiting, and I hear a helicopter coming, and they won't tell me what is going on, what happened with the other individual, what's going on with me. I was completely numb. head to toe. Didn't know what was I missing, fingers. I don't know what was going on. But I do remember telling them, it's kind of ingrained in us. Some of these uniform pieces that we wear are very expensive, and that is our boots, these black boots that we have to wear. That I didn't like them, but it's part of the uniform. So I remember telling these guys, because paramedics want to cut off all your clothes and get down and see what's going on. Don't cut the boots. I said, all right, we won't cut the boots. So they didn't. So they cut everything else off. So here I am in my underwear and these black boots out in this field. Quite humbling, quite embarrassing. If you ever had that in your head, to get it out, because it'll haunt you. So I get the helicopter ride to the hospital, get an operation on my elbow. I'm off work for 3 months trying to come back all this. I had some shoulder issues, but that head injury, that was a tough one. I get back to work, everything's going well. I promoted to the rank of sergeant in 2008. And shortly after that, about 3 months after that, I started getting these signs and these feelings. I had what I thought was acid reflux. And then I had this pain in my shoulder all the way down to my thumb, just about a 1/4 inch from shoulder all the way to my thumb. And then this acid reflux, which would get worse at night when I lay down, so I couldn't sleep well. And I didn't know what was going on. I was heavy into bodybuilding way back then. And I thought maybe I was overtraining. 3 days before I was talked into going to see a doctor. I go in and they suck me up, put me in a room immediately, do an EKG. EKG's fine. But the blood work came back bad. I guess your heart puts out an enzyme when it's not functioning right. My enzyme levels were quite high. So I was 6 days in the ICU, 3 operations through the femoral arteries, and they put 3 stents in my heart. This is in my late 40s. And, the operations were easy. If anybody ever has to go through that, they were very, very easy. The hardest part for me about this, maybe I'm just sensitive about it, but was when the doctor came into the emergency room and he says, Kevin, there's something wrong with your heart. We have to find out what that is. And my first thought was, I'm tearing up. Am I going to see my 2 boys again? Am I ever going to leave this place? So I think a lot has to go with how we talk to people. I know he could have done that a little different. Maybe I'm being overly sensitive, but that was me. And my thought out of this whole thing, what I remember about this traumatic experience is what he said. So I go through all the process of this. I'm off work for a while, get back to work. And unfortunately, many of us in law enforcement go through a divorce, and that happened to me. My ex-wife is from Japan with 2 little boys at the time. She wrote a suicide note to each of my boys and was looking up on the computer how to load a gun. So whenever I wanted to stop by, I didn't know what I would come up into. It was very, very tough, very difficult time. All of this took a toll on me that I didn't see, and I didn't see for a long time. I didn't acknowledge it. Maybe I didn't want to acknowledge it. But I could go to work and function at 100%. I'm fine. Everything's great. But when I went home, more days than not, I didn't want to do anything. I could sit on a couch for 3 days. Didn't feel like walking the dog. Didn't want to go see my boys. Didn't want to go to the grocery store, wash the clothes. Many, many days, I didn't feel like doing a thing. How can this be? How can I go to work and be great and come home? And the majority of my time at home, I don't want to do a thing. It was strange. Finally, on a routine physical with my regular doctor that I've seen for years, he knows my history, I tell him this, and he goes, let's take a test. I'm going to have you take this test. And many of you may have seen this, the Patient Health Questionnaire 9, PHQ 9. He has me take this, and it's about my quality of life. How am I doing? Well, apparently I didn't do so well on this test. He comes back in the room holding this sheet of paper. He says, Kevin, you have depression. How do you feel about that? He knows my history. What do you mean? How do I feel about this? Who would want this? So he puts me on a medication. Again, with the verbiage, we can do better than that. I know we can do better than that. He puts me on a medication. It seems to help some. But I had some trauma when I was a young man that I really haven't come out and spoke about. But I would see a man's face 2 inches from my face every single night when I would try to sleep. And it just haunted me, worse than most things I had seen on the patrol. And you see some things on the patrol. So I wrote him an email, my doctor, and And this is based on mental health professionals looking at me and them not knowing what's going on with me, but telling me there's something else. There's something else. These are intelligent people, but I didn't want to talk about it. I said, you need to see a psychiatrist. So finally, okay, I email my doctor. He emails me back, says, Kevin, I tell him I'm not suicidal. Since you are not actively suicidal, I don't recommend going to seeing a psychiatrist. But if you want to, here's their number and best health wishes for you. Wow. Okay, I did it anyway. I went to a psychiatrist and she was wonderful. She listened. Everything that I had been taught is what she did, or what I was hoping for. So we sat and I shared with her for the first time what had happened to me. She recommended I do, if I can get this right, eye movement, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So with high cholesterol, high blood pressure, all these things going on, my own quality of life was deteriorating. I thought to myself, you know what, going in with this, I have to do some other things too. And I will discuss that with you a little later on. But I went into this, I didn't want to really do any of this, but I wanted to get better. So I went through this therapy. And this woman, the therapist, told me, you know what, I cannot take that trauma away. But what we can try to do, instead of that face being right here every single night, we're going to get it so it's way the hell out there so you can get some rest. And I went through this with an open mind and an open heart, and that's what it did. I was finally able to get some rest. So it has truly, truly helped me. I want to tell you what hit me the most out of all these things that you're seeing here. Mind you, we knew my mother was dying, and of course that's a big impact on my life. But depression and hit me the worst. It took a heavy toll on me. Stuff that I could see it when I was at work. I could see it with folks, but I don't know if I really believed it. Very, very tough. But until I say, you know what, I need some help, that's when I started getting better. Why didn't I get help? Why didn't I look into this? I didn't want to be vulnerable. I had these macho jobs in the military, worked at San Quentin, was in the highway patrol, was a motor sergeant. I'm not going to be vulnerable. We don't show a weakness. So here's what can happen. They can really bite you in the butt. This stigma surrounding it, what society might think of me, what my friends and everybody might think of me. I didn't lose any friends. I gained millions all over. It's been really, really neat. Avoiding this, thinking that it might go away, when really it can just get worse. And denial, like I've said, this can't be happening to me. I'm stronger than this. This can hit anybody. It really, really can. And on top of this, let me share something else with you. So since I retired, I fly around a lot. Armando, I have this plane ready for us at any time. We fly around in Air Force One. We get about 10 feet off and we'll do a talk. And then we pop right back on and we hit the next place. So here I am flying around doing all these talks, not realizing what is going on at the house where my boys are at and with my ex. This is my oldest boy, Kevin Jr. When he was 14, he was going through a lot. And I didn't realize this. I didn't see it. Here I am traveling all over, even going out of country, talking about suicide and suicide prevention and mental illness and things. And what's going on at home, I'm missing. His grades were okay, but I kept pushing him for grades. Finally, he had had enough. I get a call that he says he's going to kill himself. I get it from his younger brother. I show up at the house. He's in the backyard all by himself. He's screaming, crying. When I talk to him, I go, what is going on? And we talked for a long time that evening about things. He thought that his mother and I divorced because of him, because of the kids. And we know that he had nothing to do with it, but I was too embarrassed and ashamed to talk to him about it. So he thought he caused this. His grades were good, but I kept pushing him for better and better grades. As a parent, I wanted to succeed. We all want our kids to succeed. I didn't realize how much I was pushing him. Some kids in school were using drugs now, and he didn't want anything to do with it. He wants to play soccer and he wants to try and get good grades. But he has that peer pressure to fit in. They all want friends. It's very, very important. And probably a very large part of this was, since I'm gone a lot, I would tell him, Kevin, you're in charge. If something happens at the house, you got to get everybody out. If he catches fire, whatever happens, you have to take charge. He's just 14. So he had a very difficult time with all of this. He's ready to cash out. It was tough. We made an appointment with him to see a mental health professional. On the day of the appointment, I take him, we get to the office, and I say, "Hey, Kevin, if it's okay, do you want me in the room with you?" He goes, "Yeah, Dad, I want you in the room." Gentleman comes out, and I explained to him who I am and what I did for a living with the patrol. And I asked him, "Is it okay if I'm in the room?" "Oh, yeah, come on in, come on in." So we go in. Now he sits behind his desk, behind the barrier. I don't like this already. I don't like barriers. Kevin sits directly in front of him. I'm off on the left side. So I don't say a thing throughout this whole thing, mind you. I shouldn't, and I didn't. So he starts asking him a lot of questions, trying to get to know him better. And then he digs into him a little bit, and he goes, "Well, Kevin, if you were going to kill yourself, don't you think your parents would be sad?" And Kevin goes, "Well, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, and then they'd be okay." That's that frontal lobe development, I believe, of him just looking just a little ways into the future, not very far. And then he asked him some more questions, and he asked him, "Well, if you were going to kill yourself, how would you do it?" "Well, I would use my dad's gun." Okay. And then a few more questions, and then he asked him, "Kevin, have you ever hurt yourself on purpose?" And I'm thinking, I didn't shake my head. I didn't want to give any clues, but I'm thinking, no, not my boy, in a way. But he does this. He sticks his wrist and then rips it down. So now my boy's a cutter. Non-suicidal self-injury. I could not believe this was happening in front of me. I'm missing everything. I'm traveling all over talking about it, and I'm missing what's going on in front of me. It was horrible to hear this. I was tearing up. It was very, very tough. I don't think we have the time to go into non-suicidal self-injury, but people injure themselves, whether they're banging their head on a wall, whether they're punching things, whatever they're doing, they do it for a whole variety of reasons. But a lot of times they're in so much pain that this helps with their pain. It's very tough. So I encourage you all to do some research on this. It's brutal stuff. And then he gives them a few more questions. And then from behind his barrier, he made up his mind about Kevin. And here's what he said. He goes, "Well, Kevin, well, you're not suicidal, right?" And I'm thinking in my head, what just happened? He didn't validate, normalize, nothing. Wow. Of course, Kevin's going to say no. And it's an adult to a little kid. So the session went on for a little bit. And then I spoke with him afterwards. And I have a deep respect for those in the medical community. And I didn't want to say anything really off base, but just based on what I've been through and some of the training that I've been through, I said, that's typically not how I would do it or what I've seen in the past. So I think he was very humbled by it and embarrassed. Now, I don't know if this gentleman, it appeared to me that he had not had suicide assessment training. And I know there's a lot of states that still don't require that. It is getting better. And mind you, I get to speak with a lot of medical professionals these days, and they do a wonderful job at this. This individual did not at that time. But we did stay with him. Kevin is doing better. So we were very lucky. But, to see this, my own boy, talk about growth for me as an individual and trying to see what is going on. Almost lost this young man with this. So for those of you who care to look at this one and see, there are other coping mechanisms besides hurting yourself. I'll leave this up for just a second, but I saw it so many times. I went to Montana last year and did 24 talks in 8 days. And I went to a lot of different high schools, and I was amazed at how many young women came up and spoke to me afterwards who were hurting themselves. It's very tough, very brutal, and the scars that they have internally and externally. So there's a lot of work to do, and each of us plays a role in this. What are we looking for? Someone who may be in crisis. And I'm not just saying suicidal, but may be in crisis and needing assistance. All these here, especially when it comes to sleeping too much or using alcohol or drugs, because they're in such emotional pain that this way they're not in that pain when they're sleeping way too much or they're taking the drugs. Let's say you go out with someone 3 times a week, you're having coffee with them, and all of a sudden they stopped coming. And out and meeting you, and they're just staying at home. They don't want to come out of their room. What's going on? These changes in behavior. What is going on? We want to find out. And some additional ones we're looking at for kids: declining grades, not showing up, being bullied, things that maybe we don't know about so much, and being withdrawn. Many times I've done some studies. Someone who is suicidal has spoken about it or written about it. Two big ones that are out there that have happened quite a bit. How do we have a conversation with someone who may be in crisis? What are we looking at here? And mind you, these folks can get very angry at you, because this is a very tough conversation to have. They may be mad. I would rather have that individual mad at me and still here than me not take action and that individual lose their life to suicide. So keep that in mind. They may be mad or nail at you, but they're going to come around. It may take a week, it may take months, no matter what it is, but your bond will be stronger because you care. So prepare, knowing this in advance. Have some information with you. At the clinic, Menninger, great, lots of information there, lots of information. Plus the 1-800-273-TALK line and the 741-741 crisis text line. So have some information with you about local resources should you need it. Location, where do we have this at? I would say have this somewhere where they're comfortable. I was forced into most of the times dealing with someone on the bridge, a very uncomfortable place to have this. Very windy, very cold, lots of traffic noise, about the worst place you could do a negotiation at. But that's what we do, and that's where this is at. You want them to be comfortable. So I would say not in a coffee shop, because they may break down. And just think if it was you. You wouldn't want that in front of lots of other people. So think about the location. Be able to tell them what you have seen or heard and what is going on. And then listen. And we'll go over listening skills in just a bit here. Validate, normalize, and gratitude is so important. So when someone telling you all these different things that's been going on, they're getting a divorce, someone's passed away, they can't make their house payments, they're losing their car, all these different things. Simply by telling them and meaning it and having the empathy and really looking them in the eye. Man, that sounds really tough. I'm sorry you're going through this. Validate what they're going through is huge. And then to normalize what they're going through. You know what? Somebody who has been going through all these different things like this, and they may be thinking about suicide. Has suicide crossed your mind? Have you been thinking about it? See what they say. What if they say yes? What do you do? Take a breath. Next thing out of your mouth shouldn't be, how could you do this to me? It should be, okay, how long have you been thinking about this? What's your plan? See what is going on. If it looks like it's something that's coming up really quick, I mean, we need to get some help. 911, what are we going to do? We need to get that individual some help. And gratitude also. You know what? Thank you for sharing all that with me. I know that was very difficult. When we're looking at weapons, limit means, meaning pills, whatever that may be. There's an organization out there now. I just found out about this. It's called Hold My Guns, I believe. So some folks don't want to get the police involved. There's something else that you can look at. I think they're just starting out. I want to contact them. It looks like a pretty neat organization, because we know anywhere from 49 to 51% of the time weapons are used. And to be able to follow up and follow through. Okay. Hey, can we meet tomorrow? If everything looks okay, it's okay. Can we meet tomorrow? Can we meet in 3 days and chat? And then make sure you follow through with that and do that. And that way they have something to look forward to. By simply being in their corner, tell them you do not have to go through this alone. That's huge, because they feel like they are and nobody else knows what's going on. So by simply being there for them, I think is huge in someone's life. Some other things to look at and consider. We're trying to peel back this onion and find out what's going on. So I talk about the 80-20 rule. If at all possible, and they are talking, let them talk. One of the active listening skills we use is called minimal encouragers. Simply by saying things like, really? Wow, man. It shows that you're listening. You're not interrupting what they're saying. It shows that you're paying attention in there. So if they're speaking, remember 70-30, 80-20, something like that. When I'm talking, I'm not learning anything. I'm not gathering any information. Let them speak. Something I use occasionally is chapters in a book. Look at your life as this book. Right now, you're in a really crappy chapter. Let this play out. It may be wonderful at the end. I'm asking you, don't let this be the last chapter, the last page. Something to think about. Okay? Silence can be golden. I take a lot of breaks when I'm talking to folks. I will take a step back and let them think about everything. When you're with someone in person, personally, I would rather there be silence rather than saying something like everything's going to get better for you. I know it will. We don't know that, and that can hurt rapport and damage the conversation down the line. Just by being there, I say it time and time again, just by being there can make a world of difference. You don't have to talk all the time. You really don't. And something else we can talk about is happier times in the past. If you know the individual, did you have happy times? What did you do? Or have them explain it. And maybe why can't they go back to that? It allows you or them to vent and you to have more information. And also, is it your life that you want to end or the pain that you want to end? Really get them thinking about what's going on. Some damaging phrases. I really enjoy this when I get to speak in person to folks because I like to see what they would offer. But here's a few more. So, you should calm down. I understand things will get better. And that's how I remember this. And also why, on occasion. Why did you do that? Why did you do this? It tends to place blame and shuts down that conversation and rapport building. So instead of, you know what you should have done, how about, have you tried this? Would be a much better way of saying that. Calm down. We can leave this out the picture altogether. Has anybody in the history of telling someone to calm down ever calmed down? I don't think so. I think they get angry. I understand. I've been through some things. You folks have been through some things. But I don't understand exactly what somebody else is going through. Now, if they come up and say, well, you don't know what it's like to have cancer. Well, I do. And we can talk about that if they want. Commonalities create comfort. I typically don't share everything in my life. I'm happy to. But remember, it's about them. This is not the Kevin Briggs show. It's about them and finding out what's going on and how we can assist them. That's what it's there. And things will get better. If have someone over that rail and I'm speaking to them and I tell them, Bob, everything's going to get better. You're going to be fine. I know it. We just need you to get back today. Once you get past this crisis, you're going to be good. Finally, he says, you know what, Kevin, I'm going to come back. You told me things are going to get better. I get him back. We take him to the local hospital, SF General. A couple weeks later, Bob's back up over the rail. He said, Kevin, you told me things are going to get better. They got worse. Am I or anybody else going to be able to develop rapport with him? No, because I lied to him in essence. So I stay away from these best I can. Here's some more. You have so much to live for. So if I told that to someone, I know it's going to come right back to me. Really, tell me what I have to live for. And then I'm stuck. I've been through similar circumstances and I'm fine now. So now I'm better than you. And also, believe me, I know how you feel. I've been there, done that 100 times. This kicks people in the teeth. It really does. So we stay clear of those. Be there for them. Here's something that I've developed. I'm not the original. That anybody that is in the mental health field will know this, but I have one because I want people to be familiar with it. It's a crisis safety plan, this written list of coping strategies and support for people at high risk or who may be at high risk for suicide. So I want to get this up and show you what this looks like. And all you do is fill this out for someone who may be at risk, and they can use this whenever they want. They can look at it. If they start feeling not right, maybe it's an anniversary of a loved one being lost or something, they have this, and this is what they can use to get help. Because I think sometimes they get into this with blinders on, and this helps them see farther out. So this is something I very much believe in. I would ask, I can pass this out to anybody who would like it, give them copies, but I would ask that you work with a mental health professional on it. Very, very important. I also have my quality of life, my self-care triad, and it starts with me on the top, and I think that's very, very important. We need to be on the top. What am I doing for me? So I'm doing my transcendental meditation. I'm taking my medications. What are we doing for stress relief? How are you feeling? Knowing to have that self-compassion, that self-care, knowing that I'm going to blow it at times, not intentionally, but we can't do everything perfect. Also that professional care, not just those in the medical field, but years ago, I did a keto, a Japanese martial art, because my boys are half Japanese. I wanted to do something with them. So that sensei, that instructor, a life coach, a yoga coach, and then your support system. In law enforcement, I think we're lacking that quite a bit because we try to handle everything on our own. But that support system is absolutely critical for us. And then for those in the medical field and first responders, I really want you to take a look at this and see, how are you doing? Take a deep down look, okay? From what we see, some of the things that we see, from what we hear from stories of others, and what's around you all play a part in our health. So look what can be affected: emotional, anxiety and sadness, cognitive, all these different things. It's lowered concentration, preoccupation with traumatic events. I've seen that time and time again with folks. Behavioral, we're looking at withdrawal and absenteeism, and somatic with a rapid heartbeat and impaired immune system and difficulty sleeping, and spiritual, loss of purpose and questioning belief. Please take a look at yourself. How are you really doing? You're on top, okay? And then we come down with our families and everything else. It's very hard for us to help other people when we're suffering. I have one more story I'd like to share with you. We take a lot of pictures down at the Golden Gate Bridge, and this young man here, really nice guy, but on the day I met him, here he was, over the rail on the Golden Gate Bridge. This is Kevin Berthia. I met him on the darkest day of his life. He was going through a very, very difficult time. He was adopted. His birth mother wanted nothing to do with him. The people that adopted him loved him very, very much, but they divorced when he was around 13, and it wasn't explained to him about the divorce. He thought he broke apart the family unit, so that weighed heavy on his mind. He suffered from a mental illness, was supposed to be taking medication, but it stopped it. That's a big one. We've talked about that. And he thought, if I just stay busy, I'm doing okay. So that's what he did. He stayed busy as long as he could. Throughout the day, he played 6 different sports. It wasn't until way late at night when he would go to bed, and that's when he would have a very, very difficult time sleeping. And that's when he suffered the most. So as long as he stayed busy, he was okay. That's what he did. Pretty much exhausted and ran himself out. After school, when he graduated after high school and such, he thought, if I start a family, things will get better. So he starts a family, had a baby, but his baby was born premature, a couple of months. They had to stay in the hospital. Now he says, what did I do to cause harm to this young child? And when the baby was able to came home with a bill for around $250,000. And he thinks, now I can't afford this. On top of this, just lost his job. Now he can't provide for his family. He hurt his family. Everything's spiraling down for him. He's had enough. He feels like he's a burden. And he says, you know what? That's it. I'm ending my life. He's from Oakland, never been over to the Golden Gate Bridge, goes there. And then that's when I meet him over the rail. He's by the North Tower, and all that's there is this little bitty pipe. And you can see he doesn't care about what's going on. He has one hand in his pocket, his left hand, his right hand is up between his skin and his shirt because it's so cold out there. So he tells me this story over the course, and a lot of things over the course of slightly over an hour, almost an hour and a half. And I'm thinking to myself, he's shivering out there. I'm thinking he can fall. He's just tripoding right now. And he's cold and he keeps looking down. Most of the time I'm down and I'm trying to look at him eye to eye, but he won't even look at me the majority of the time. I'm thinking I'm going to lose this guy. It was very tough. I thought about even bringing in somebody else to speak with him, but he was just so far gone and so far down. So it was brutal to hear his story and hear this guy. But I'm thinking, what could I say to this guy to give him some hope, this little ray of sunshine in his life, to have him want to come back and live again? So I thought about it, and I go, you know what? His child. And his child was going to have a birthday in a bit. And I brought that up and said, you know what? What about your child? gonna have a birthday in a little bit. Don't you want to be there for her birthday? You go, Kev, you can come back here anytime. And I want to personalize everything. If he allows me to use his first name, which he did, I'm calling him his first name, and they call me just my first name, just Kevin. So here it's Kevin and Kevin. But I said, don't you want to be there for her birthday? You can come back here anytime. My job is to get him past this crisis and over the rail without lying to him. So I gave him some time to think about it. I stepped away, gave him a bit. And when I walked back up, he says, you know what? I want to come back over. So that's about the time when a helicopter out in the bay took this photo here that you're seeing. So I helped him come back over the rail, and then I congratulated him. And before we left the scene, I asked him, Kev, what did I do that helped the situation? And what did I do that wasn't so good that hurt the situation? All he told me was, you listened. You let me speak, and you listened. So why did it take for this gentleman to get all the way up to this Golden Gate Bridge for somebody to listen? Why can't we do that right here and right now? We may not have all the answers, but we can certainly be there for one another. So I didn't see him for years. I hoped and prayed that he was doing well. I was contacted by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention to receive an award, which I kind of passed on to the officers, but they wanted me. And my commander was giving me a lot of pressure to do this. They wanted me to go out to New York to receive this. It would look good for the Highway Patrol. Well, they kept asking me, is there somebody you saved that can present this to you? And I don't like that word, saved. I don't think I saved anybody. I think maybe I helped folks on a dark day. So I had a note from his mother. She had written to me a couple of weeks after this incident, and I kept that. I still have it. I went out to Oakland. She was at the residence, met her. She gave me a big hug when she found out who I was. She got a hold of Kevin, and he met me out there in New York City. Here we are. And he got up and spoke. And this was the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, a big once-a-year gala. He got up and did a wonderful job. And I didn't realize this, but Kev hated this photo. It shows a black man at a very weak point in their life, and people would recognize him. It was in the newspapers on this. But when he got up and spoke, and when he was done, he had a standing ovation. He realized that that photo was just a journey for him to be where he is now. And he's doing much, much better. He and I remain in contact, and on occasion get to go on stage and speak together, and it's wonderful. So he's doing well. But he did the work and put it in to get better, which is ongoing. So he's doing good. We are close friends now. But it's about listening. That's what this is about. Maybe we can't fix it. We can give someone to a mental health professional, and they can work on that. Give them the opportunity to get better. And those in the medical field, take a look at yourself. How are you doing? So I want to conclude with that. Thank you all very, very much for having me. And we'll get back. I'm going to stop the share now.
Thank you, Kevin, for that inspiring talk. Really appreciate all you've done to help people. And I know you'll continue to do that. Thank you for being here. I would now like to introduce Michelle Patriquin, who is our Director of Research. Dr. Patriquin is Director of Research and Assistant Professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Baylor College of Medicine. She is board certified by the American Board of Professional Psychology in Clinical Child and Adolescent Psychology, and her research interests are in the biological precursors of mental illness and translating these findings into actionable clinical interventions. She's particularly interested in how we can improve mental health outcomes by developing and leveraging new technologies, and her research has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, Organization for Autism Research, and Menninger Medical Institute, and we are lucky to have her. And so turn it over to Michelle for Q&A. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Armando. Thanks for that nice introduction. Sergeant Briggs, are you still there? I don't see your video.
Yes.
You are? Okay, great. Oh yeah, there. I see you. Okay, so everyone can submit any questions they want Sergeant Briggs to answer through the Q&A button. If you hover your mouse over, there's a black bar at the bottom of the Zoom screen. While people do that, I'm just gonna briefly describe what we do in Menninger research, because I think it aligns really nicely with what Sergeant Briggs talked about today. we're really interested and committed to using science and innovation to discover answers for mental health issues, particularly suicide. And this is from a biomarker angle. So Dr. Ramiro Salas investigates brain imaging, genetic markers of suicide, as well as developing new interventions, things for sleep and suicide. And one of our suicide researchers, Dr. Katrina Rufino, has developed an app actually to modify your thinking around suicide. So I think, we have a long way to go. There are a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to mental health in general, and how we predict and provide effective treatment for suicide. But I think there's tremendous opportunity with research and science and innovation to develop new ways and life-saving answers. So with that, we are going to ask Sergeant Briggs some questions. That sounds good. We have a bunch of good ones. Okay. So kind of going back to your personal story that you shared, Sergeant Briggs. So you saw a physician from time to time, but many men won't do that. What can friends, bosses, and family say to men to see a professional if they're feeling depressed or drinking or using too much? How can you really connect, particularly with men? And in the field you're in too, right? There's kind of this, let's just ignore our emotions, get through it. And how do you reach those individuals?
Right. I do it by talking about what I've been through and saying I did, and this is what happened. It was a very positive event for me to go see a mental health professional, but there was a journey along the way and a lot of struggling. But if you don't, you will continue. It can get worse. It really can. So when I talk to folks, that's how I put it is, man, I believe in it so much, but you have to open your heart and open your mind, and you want to get better. How are you doing right now? Okay, these things are going on. How's your quality of life? Are you getting out? What's going on? Would you want it to change? Would you be willing to work to get it to change? So by using my own example and telling them, you know what, things can get better. It doesn't have to be like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you said about commonalities create comfort.
Right.
And that's kind of, fitting with that. That's really powerful. Okay. Let's see. So this is sort of going towards providers. So people often look the other way to let someone else deal with a crisis. How can we challenge ourselves to be confident or prepared to have a conversation with someone having a crisis?
So we spoke about how to do it today, but that was very quick and tough. It's very difficult. I don't know if even a mental health professional who does this daily is that comfortable in it. It's can you think of a tougher one to have? It's brutal. But I think by doing some research and talking to people, how can we have that? Taking a class, I'm sure you have classes there that you offer, and then there's ASSIST, mental health first aid, QPR. I took all of those and try to be better. Being in law enforcement, I also went through CIT, crisis intervention training, and then I was one of the very few and humbled folks to go through the FBI crisis negotiators course. But there's a lot of information out there. If you just look it up, how to do it, and you'll see these different avenues. So have that with you, go into it. And then if you're taking a class, ask them questions. And say, hey, this is how we do this. Also, if you have the opportunity to take a class in active listening skills and to take them down one by one, because everybody's heard of it, but how many people have taken a formal class in active listening skills?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, the continuing education, right? And that's never ending. I think, in research, we're always like, okay, what's the next research question? And how do we integrate new information? And that's a continuous process too, I'm sure for you as well.
Is. I want to learn more. I'm continually studying, and if there's something class that I like, I'll still take classes, and I'm retired, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Okay. Oh, I like this question. So would you recommend asking about a person's spirituality when negotiating with an actively suicidal person?
I never did. But if they brought it up, we would definitely can talk about it. But I would not say, if they didn't bring it up and say, You know, if you I always go back to where I worked, if you jump, God's not going to let you into heaven. I mean, I would never, ever say anything like that. People have asked me, do you think God's going to let me in heaven if I jump? I said, boy, that's really not for me to decide. But I will tell you, if you have been a good person all your life, and right now you're going through a very traumatic time, why wouldn't he?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I personally, I don't necessarily bring it up, but if they do, I can talk about it. I was raised Catholic, so I can know a couple of things. But if you both go to the same church and you know each other, yes, absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, it really is meeting the person with where they're at, not necessarily, right? You don't want to force that on them. Yeah.
Wrong time, wrong time.
It's not the right time.
Not the right time.
Yeah. Okay. This is a good one for that self-care. So how do you deal with situations where you weren't able to help prevent an individual die by suicide?
That's a good one. I've lost folks. When I teach negotiators, I go through this whole thing, these little secret things of what to say and do. But for most of the folks, it haunts me. And what I teach is not to watch what happens afterwards, not to watch that body fall. I will tell you, but I do, because I want to mark that body, getting in a little detail, but I want that body recovered. But I also, that is in my head forever. I had a gentleman turn around once before he jumped and shake my hand, and he shook my hand 3 times. We had a bond, and then he jumped and he thanked me, but he said, I have to go, and he jumped. So it's always there. But to know that I can go and seek some help about it, and my department allowed me. If you're in some agency that has EAP and these different things, utilize that. You do not have to live in these crisis moments and going home and putting your head down and rethinking of what could I have done different? Am I worthy to do this? And all these different things. No, you want to do it. You are good at it. We need you out there. But you need to have the time to process these and process them correctly. You do not have to live with this turmoil.
Yes, and even though you may be a professional, getting your own professional help is sometimes needed, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I see mental health professionals when I'm talking about it. I've had some come up and say, "Thank you. I know this has been bothering me for the longest time. I am going to get some help." So it's not just 20 years of college and then this guy who's working on the bridge. It's how we work together. What can I bring to the table? What can you bring to the table? How can we become better at our crafts? And how can we help others? That's what this is about.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, okay. How should one support someone that is dealing with a loved one that is suicidal?
How can we support some in our own family?
Yeah. So I think how can we support someone that has, maybe someone in their family, maybe one of our friends has a child who is suicidal or their spouse is suicidal, something like that.
Knowing about what they're going through. You can look online. There's so much there about how we can help one another. If let's just say you have a neighbor whose child may be suicidal, something like that, knowing that they're going through a rough time, maybe bringing them over food, even telling them, you know what? I know a lot of kids, including my own, don't want to talk to the parent, but they'll talk to somebody else. And usually they'll talk to another kid. So if I have a kid, hey, if you hear anything, you need to let us know because it's a safety issue.
Mhm.
But knowing what's going on and just being there for them. Hey, I realize you all may be having a very difficult time right now. You can call me 24 hours a day. You can knock on my door. I just want to let you know I'm here for you. And
Okay.
that can be a big world of difference. And we talk about means. If there's guns there, hey, I can hold them over here for you.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So, another good question. So, Kevin, how do you cope kind of late at night, and how do you recommend parents help their kids get through nights when it's late, quiet, lonely? We know the statistics that suicides, right, typically can happen in the evenings, right? That nighttime is a really high risk period.
And I will base it on my own boy who he was accepted into UC Davis into their Division I soccer program, but he wasn't sleeping. And he actually had to come back home. And now he's in a community college, but he was accepted into this big time college, Division I. But it just wasn't a good fit for him right then because of what he's going through and the sleeping. So right now, we take him, he's going for therapy to try to get the sleep. If you don't get sleep, it is so, so important. I mean, it just wreaks havoc on everything about you. It is so important. But to teach them, especially kids, because they're on the social media, my youngest one's he's on stuff all day long. You have to turn that stuff off or limit it, especially when it comes to bedtime. I myself watch too much TV on occasion. Turn that off at least an hour before I want to go to bed. These little tricks of the trade, that phone, put it away. Maybe even turn the whole Wi-Fi off for the house. We need our quiet time to relax. A reading, I wouldn't say studying, I would say something casual that you want to read. That can really help. Watching the caffeine, if I have any kind of chocolate before I go to bed, I'm done. I can have a cup of coffee even, but for me, chocolate, I'm done, I'm away. So I really have to watch what I eat and drink. And I think that's important also as we get close to bedtime.
Yes, that's really good advice. And I can't stress more. That's something we study here is the link between sleep and suicide. Sleep is one of the strongest predictors of every suicide outcome, thinking, plans, and action as well. So it's super important, right, that you're not awake at night, right, that you do fall asleep and get restful sleep, right? The quality of your sleep is also important, that you feel rested afterwards. That can affect your mood, right? Not just suicide, but depression, anxiety as well. So getting that good sleep is a really important.
Right. And we're looking at like sleep apnea. I happen to have that too. I very seldom ever talk about it, but I'm supposed to be with the machine and wearing the headgear like I'm flying the F-16 and all of that. But it helps. You know, it can really help with folks. I don't do it as I'm supposed to. I will admit I'm working on it. I'm even looking at something that gets implanted that helps with the sleep apnea. But my best friend, he wears this every single night and he swears by it. He puts it on and within a minute, he's out.
Wow. And probably gets pretty restful sleep.
Oh, he loves it.
Right. Yeah.
We do a lot of traveling together and fishing and different things. And he puts this little machine on and it's humming away and he's just out. And I'm like, okay, trying.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So another question about coping strategies. So this person's interested in alternative, less harmful coping strategies. So can these strategies be mobilized through suicide prevention program or intervention in a way that would demonstrate efficacy with long-term mental health outcomes? So is there any way to kind of integrate some of these less harmful coping strategies into a program of some kind that you could figure out if it works or not?
Oh, I'm sure. And probably you would be the one to answer this way before I could. But I can just tell you that there are coping strategies that do not require you to hurt yourself and release those endorphins like that. Maybe can mimic that. Mm-hmm. There are therapies and there's even drugs out there that have been shown to help with non-suicidal self-injury. Mm-hmm. So it's a coping mechanism and it leads to other things. It's very, very brutal. I've seen a lot of scars on people up on that bridge with women who carve, I'm fat on their inner thigh and guys who are cutting their chests and their arms and things. So it's something to look at. And I would say, please get to a mental health professional who deals with this specifically and can get you on that right path.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of really wonderful evidence-based interventions for suicide that incorporate a lot of those coping strategies too. One that we use here is collaborative assessment management of suicidality, CAMS. And I think you know CAMS, Sergeant Briggs, and it really integrates a lot of those tools that are extremely helpful and give alternative paths to some of the more harmful coping strategies. Okay. What do you recommend for someone who has a friend or family member who shows the signs of depression, but will not address it and becomes defensive when the topic is brought up?
I think that happens a lot. I think I did that when people wanted to talk to me about it, until they can come around and see, you know what, how is your quality of life? How did it used to be? How is it now? Is it deteriorating? So all we can do is bring it up and try to be there and try and help them. But if we try to force it down their mouth, it's not going to work, and they're going to get angry, and it's not going to go well at all. But if we can just say, you know what, I've been doing a lot of reading. You might look into this just to see what they say, or a lot of studying about it. So they have to want to get better. I have to be able to pull up my own bootstraps when possible. You know, some folks, you're so far down that you can't, and you need to be in a hospital for a while. But if it's just someone who is suffering from depression that is not this big time that really overwhelms you to where you can't even take a step outside, you can't function, try to have a chat with them. I know it's difficult, especially guys, because we want to handle everything our own. Don't bother with nothing. I will handle it. You're not going to label me as someone who takes medication for depression. I don't believe in mental illness. It is out there. It is real. It's true. That's why I use my own examples of doing these macho jobs and saying this happened to me. No, it can happen to anybody. There's no shame in it. The stigma. No. You have to want to get better, though. They have to really think about it. So tell them, hey, just look at it. Go do some research on it. See what you think.
Yes.
Let them do it on their own too, and it might. Wow, all these things are happening to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Really, that listening too, to get them to talk about it. Okay. Let's see. We got a lot of good questions. Okay. Over the years, what would you say have changed, if anything, in the way you approach suicidal individuals? Has your approach changed over time?
Has my personal approach has.
And what over these years? Yeah, I think so.
I have become, and this is just me speaking, I've become more confident in at least acknowledging the fact that we need to do this. So when I first started working on the bridge, I didn't know anything about this. I would walk up like I would. We are taught to come in and take charge and calm the chaos, so to speak. So that's what I would try to do. Now, since I've been doing this for a long time and studying and taking classes, what I do is walk up and, like I said, just hold my hand up. Hi, I stay away. My name's Kevin. I'm not Sergeant Kevin Richard Briggs with the Highway Patrol. Who cares? I'm Kevin. Is it okay if I come up and talk with you for a while? I want to empower them the best that I can. I think that's very important. And if I was talking to a friend, like I tell you, hey, can we go have a chat tomorrow at 2? Where would you like to meet? Somewhere where they would, and hopefully we can meet somewhere private. Because if they break down, they don't want to break down in public, and you want to get the truth. And it may take a while, and they may get mad at you. Man, you're showing lots of signs of depression and these different things that I've done a lot of studying about. And you folks do the same thing. You've read about this and you see about it. So to tell them, I'm just concerned. I'm concerned about your quality of life and your welfare. How are you doing? I'm here for you. I have nothing to do. My cell phone's turned off and it's quiet. And I'm just, when they're speaking though, if they want to let go, just take it. Keep taking it. You both cry together, laugh together. So be there for them. I don't want to go to the mental health professional. I don't want to. How about if I go with you? I'll go with you. We'll set an appointment and I'll be there all along the way.
Good. Awesome. Okay. So you had your own experience of watching for teen suicide. What are some things to watch for in teenagers to indicate suicidality?
Yeah. So isolating themselves, grades going down, not going to class, absenteeism. Maybe they're starting to use drugs. And I'm telling you this because this is exactly what my son did. A lot of this stuff that I thought would never occur. Is it summer out and really, really hot? And I think y'all got a little bit of heat there in the Houston area. Are they wearing a sweater covering up their arms? Well, why is that? So a lot of things to look at. How is their attitude? Are they avoiding you? Who are they hanging around with? So that's a big indicator of what's going on too. So these types of things, what are they saying to you? Not to go pry in their room, but if you happen to go in to clean it and you see something on the desk and they're writing about death and suicide and different things, what's going on? You know, it makes it difficult to confront them, very hard. But the other side of that is you want to lose that kid. Have the courage to have that conversation, to sit down with them. My thought, and doctor, you may have a little different theory on this, but I'm thinking I don't want to be the gang up on this. Whenever I did my negotiations, I always wanted it one-on-one. I didn't want it two-on-one thing. So I'm thinking maybe one parent would do this if they were going to do it, or an uncle or aunt or something. But to have a conversation and see, and then, hey, you mind if we go talk to the doctor about this? I'm such a big believer in getting the mental health professionals. I've swayed way over from what I used to be. So, because there's good ones out there. I've seen them. We had a kind of a bad experience with my boy, but I've seen the other side of it too, and the wonderful work. And there's a lot of research. There's a lot of things we can get online. Not that we believe everything online, but folks will be able to tell.
Yes, yeah, from reliable sources, there's wonderful information out there. Especially, you mentioned the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is a really great resource as well.
They can look at that. They can look at National Alliance on Mental Illness. There's several that have a lot of good information.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I think this is an interesting question. So mental health has kind of been brought up, how we can collaborate mental health professionals with the police. Where do you see sort of opportunities for, you've mentioned some of them, but where are there opportunities for mental health professionals and police, law enforcement to collaborate?
I think it's a great idea. If they're talking about writing with the police, I think that's great. I used to be a whole different view of that, but since I've seen it in action, and actually there's some guys in Texas that I know that do this, and one's a psychologist, and he's on the SWAT team also as part of the negotiation team, and they do a wonderful job. So I think it's great if we can get them, if you get them paired up right, but it can be difficult. I will tell you, it's hard to get someone to come into the law enforcement field if you're not law enforcement. It's hard to break that barrier, but once you do, you're in. So I would tell you, please go in without ego, without, a lot of baggage and things. Go in and try to assimilate. I think that really helps. But for those who work, if you get someone who has been CIT trained, crisis intervention trained as an officer, and then a mental health professional, boy, that's going to work wonders. I spoke up in Bend, Oregon, and the chief of police introduced me, and he talked about crisis intervention training for officers. And he said he had all of his officers trained in crisis intervention training. And since that time, since everybody's been trained, their use of force has diminished 50%. It's huge. Huge. Learning different techniques and how to handle folks. So I think it's a great idea if we can do more of it. I know there's a lot of cost involved, but the outcomes tend to be a lot better too.
Yes, yeah, that's amazing. Kind of relatedly, how should law officers, police treat suicidal persons when they are taken into custody to prevent more stress and anxiety when they're transporting them to a hospital?
That's a great question. I actually got a call from a CNN person a few years ago, and they had one question for me, and that was it. So here's what I teach, and here's what I believe in. And I always go back to where I was. I'm talking to somebody over the rail on the bridge. I tell them, I don't say if you come back over, I say when you come back over, because I want them to know the process. When you come back over, I have to place you in handcuffs. And that's only because that's our policy. You are not under arrest. You're not getting a ticket. You're not going to jail. Nothing like that. It's just our policy. And then I'm going to take you down to one of the local hospitals. And I will tell you, since I've started doing that, I never had an issue. I did have some issues with family members because they would meet at the hospitals or something. Why are they in handcuffs? But I'm not concerned with that so much as I am with the individual. Never had a negative outcome by explaining it to them. And I found that out with a lot of things. They explain the process to them.
Do you think that would ever change as a policy? This isn't part of the question. It's my own question, actually, because it does feel kind of like a criminal, right? Like you feel like that potentially.
And there's a few things around. So let's say, for me in the highway patrol, I was on a motorcycle, but I would give them to what we call the car cop. Well, that individual usually we're by ourselves. So if we have someone who we're taking down for a possible 3-day hold, I want them to be safe. Let's just say we're going 55 down the freeway, taking them to the hospital, and they decide then, sit in the car going, you know what, I don't want to do this. And they don't have handcuffs on. They can injure the officer. They can get out and reach and get through the car. So there's a number of factors. But in all honesty, you know, that's the other part of this. We are in charge of their safety then too. So I want them to be safe. But this is what I taught, what I found to be best. And like I said, I never had an issue with it, but it needs to be explained when you come back over or whatever you're doing. Now, sometimes they do go bad and you have to wrestle with someone. Let's say you're on the street and that individual has a weapon or something. If you can get that away and handcuff them, of course, then they're handcuffed and go. Generally, charges aren't brought against them, generally, because of the mental illness. But people have to realize there's an officer safety factor. And I hear this quite frequently. Why did they have to shoot that individual with a knife? I'm looking at me going home to my family. There's things we can do to try to mitigate this, but if he comes running at you with a knife, we can go all day with these types of things. You know, 21 feet and you're done. There's a lot of studies, and we try this through our training, and we shoot every single month with the highway patrol. 21 feet away, that person has a knife. They will get to you and stick you before you get a chance to pull your gun out. So these are things the public doesn't know. And I try to be on both sides of it and talk about this, but I'm going to tell them the facts. And we're happy to have folks come in and here, we'll have a fake rubber knife, try to get a gun out. What are you going to do? Okay, you're done. You're not going home to your family. So we cannot let that individual roam the streets with this. There's other ways of looking at things too. So we have to use what we have available. Mm-hmm. We don't want to hurt anybody. I can tell you, you know, it doesn't happen. We want everyone to be safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the goal is to maintain your safety as well as the individuals.
Right.
Right. That's why you're doing it. That makes sense. Okay. Were you ever in a situation when a person declined wanting your help and declined wanting you to approach them? You mentioned they kind of wave and Kevin. How did you handle that?
Sure. Actually, that happens frequently. Just get that. Sometimes they're swearing up a storm and everything else. Just go away. Let me think, because they really want to concentrate on what they're doing. They're trying to get up the courage or, you know, in my experience, very seldom have folks been on drugs or drinking up on that bridge, but it does happen quite a bit off the bridge and in my research. But they don't want. I say, you know what, I have to be here. It's part of my job. But not only that, I want to be here. I would do this even if I wasn't in uniform. And I'm just going to stay there. Maybe I'll back up a bit and give them some time and keep trying to make that rapport and develop that rapport. But if I find that I can't do it, and when I'm teaching this to negotiators, I say, get somebody else. Maybe we try a female, maybe a black officer, whatever that may be. If I find maybe they just don't like me for whatever reason, I know there's a lot of small departments out there that can't do this, but if at all possible, I'm going to get somebody else to try to break this barrier. And, you know, it's like I said, it's always about them. This is not the Kevin Briggs show. I'm not here, look how many I saved. No, what can I do to help? If I'm not breaking down, we're going to find somebody else. So I'm not leaving. I'm here for the whole entire process. If it's just me, you know, if they happen to jump, and it's sad and it's terrible, but I'm here whether they go or whether they come back, and I'm going to do my best to make this an uplifting experience for that individual that they can remember, you know what, that guy was all right. somebody finally listened to me and talked to me.
Yeah. And really making that connection too. Trying somewhat, maybe if it's not you, maybe it's someone else can kind of make that connection with them and build. I mean, it sounds like, you know, you're calling it negotiation, right? And I do clinical intervention, but we will, at the core, we first have to build rapport, right? And that connection.
That's what it's about.
Is that sort of the first stage in your negotiation?
That is.
Yeah.
That is it. Building rapport and then digging into that influencing behavioral change to get them to come back over. So it's all about building rapport. They don't know me from anything. I could be the bad guy. You know, many people think that the cops are bad folks now. We are not, but you know how we change our, if we could sit down together and have a conversation, then they'd see. But I tell folks, here's how things are going to be. I'm not going to touch you. I just want to talk.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So resources for mental health care can be scarce in some places and long wait times. Are there any resources that you would suggest that are best for a crisis sort of situation?
The 1-800-273 talk line is great. The 741-741 texting line, because we know a lot of kids don't want to talk on the phone. I think I can count on one finger how many times my boys call me. Very, very seldom, but they will text. So try those. And a lot of times there's a local number too, or from that 1-800-273 talk, they'll have local areas that they will put you through to somewhere closer to you. So those are the big ones. And then you may have stuff in your area that you can call also for help.
It's really helpful.
It's not, I want to say, it's not just for those who are suicidal. If I'm talking to someone, I'll get on that line and say, what can I do? And they may be able to feed me some good things to say or what to do and some other places to contact. They can do that for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. It's not just for individuals who may be suicidal. It can also be for people who are trying to support them.
Absolutely.
Figure out, problem solve, different strategies. What do you suggest for parents with a child with mental health issues for their self-care? So when they're really struggling as a parent to watch your child who is struggling, how does the parent engage in self-care?
Look at therapy one-on-one, look at group therapy. I know and as far as suicide loss survivors groups, there's those for that for parents. Some do. Let's hope it doesn't get to that level, but there's group therapies. There's this, like I'm seeing more and more of this teletherapy to try that. So remember, you're going to have good days and bad days also. If you're going to talk to your child and it's one of those bad days, really take a step back. Maybe have your spouse do that. Maybe you need a weekend off. And if they can handle that, or have somebody else, have an aunt or uncle come in and one of you take a break or both of you take a break for a bit and go somewhere. You know, we all need to relax and rejuvenate ourselves. There's only so much we can take, or we're not going to be a valuable asset to that individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really understanding when your emotions are escalating too, right? So not getting at 100 and kind of catching yourself maybe at 25, right? And then getting some help or taking a break. Yeah.
So here's a formula for you that I use all the time. Let's see, HE, and usually I have the slide, I put it up, but I didn't want to go over time today. HE equals LRT. High emotions equal low rational thought. So remember that HE equals LRT. High emotions equal low rational thought. Take that breath. What did you do when you slammed your fingers in that car door or burned your hand on the stove? Swear a whole bunch, kick the stove, kick the door, everything else. What did you do a half an hour later when you calmed down?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So high emotions, low rational thought.
Yes, taking a break, calming yourself down, get control over your thoughts again. Yeah, definitely. Okay, we have time for one last question. I like this one. Okay, so many people have suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts. How do we educate people to know that suicidal thoughts are okay, but that mental health help is needed? There can be such a stigma associated with having suicidal thoughts, and that
Right.
can really draw a big reaction from professionals sometimes. Yeah, how do you suggest?
I think having talks like this and knowing it's okay. If you have those thoughts, all right, so you're thinking that. We're not going to take that away from you. That's what you're thinking. But let's try to understand why. And let's get a game plan going so we have something to go and, for lack of a better, handle this situation. Because it's going to happen. We all have different things. And if you have enough things happen to you in a negative way, your dog died, your spouse is leaving you, your car broke down, you lost your house, you lost your job, man, I mean,
Yep.
it can go downhill quick.
Yep.
What are our coping mechanisms? What can we do to think about those things? That's where that crisis safety plan is. I would love to get your view on that too. I'm sure you've used quite a bit, if not frequently, but these are things that we need to look at. And I think as a society, having maybe public service announcements that come out and talk about it a bit, even having a show on it where people can watch and see, wow, they really suffered. They didn't have to, but if they would have talked about it and spoken about it and got together, and now he's getting help and they're feeling much, much better. So like when I went through CIT training, crisis intervention training, they had folks come in who had suffered terribly emotionally and had cut themselves all over and were disfigured, but they came and spoke about it. So we had a better understanding about it. And that's what it's about, understanding that individual, maybe not be able to fix it all, but have an understanding about what is going on, and they have an understanding of how to cope with what's going on and where their resources are.
Yes, I always like the quote, it's okay to not be okay,
Absolutely.
right? And I think there has become much more of a conversation actually with the pandemic about the importance of mental health. And I think when we're faced with all of these challenges, medical issues, I mean, like your personal story, right? It is a natural sort of consequence, right? Having thoughts of suicide or depression, sadness, anxiety, worry, and really normalizing that. I like your idea about the public service announcement or a TV show. I think the more that we discuss things, mental health, the more people will have access to it and the stigma will be reduced.
Right. If we didn't talk about AIDS or breast cancer, where would that be?
Right. Yeah.
So it's important to stop to talk about this, reduce that stigma. It's so important. I think it's a good start. Us doing this here is fantastic. And I really appreciate you all having me.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story and honestly, your very heroic work on the bridge. It's extremely impressive and amazing. Special thank you to you, Sergeant Briggs, for being here today.
Thank you.
And then also have to say congratulations to Armando for a year as President and CEO of Menninger during quite an unprecedented and unpredictable year. And then just a big thank you to Origin Bank too for sponsoring today's event. And please keep an eye out. We'll be sending an email with a follow-up survey and a link of the event recording that you can share with anyone you'd like. And again, thank you, Sergeant Briggs, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Michelle.